Unmute. Hello, hello. Hello, world. Hello, Louis. We've got an invisible John appearing. He's at a folk festival, I'm sure. And we'll wait for him for a minute and see if he turns up. Because here we are. And we're waiting for my bells to ring across the way. Because it's Friday night. So it's bell ringing night. Oh, look. Oh, yes. You can hear me. But can we find John? Is he expected? This would be nice if we knew that John was coming. Anybody else in the world? No, it's that first Friday of September. And everybody in the world has gone back to school. Except me. Because I don't work in school anymore. Which is joyful. But if you've gone back to school this week, I hope it wasn't awful. And if you're going back to school next week, aren't you glad you got another week off? Are you going back to school next week? Aha. Here is Mr. Rowe. Yes. No, well, we think he's here. He might be here. We're wending his way.
I exist. No, there I am. Yeah.
Hey.
Let me just get on this one. I'm sitting in
Oh, there's Babasine.
I'm sitting in Bromyard Folk Festival
I thought you were.
in a field, working with the amazing Mark Fraser.
Woo!
Who saved me loads of work because he's brought up his beautiful storytelling tent, and I don't have to bring up my shelter. So instead of coming up the day before, I'm far too relaxed, which meant I was 1 minute late. Hello, Sarah. Hello, Baba C. Hello, cute sir, Mr. President, King Louis Lindsay Tim. There we go. Your Majesty. Right, and of course Waleed sitting in the thing, in the cafe in Marrakesh. Right.
I have 2 hours ahead of time. I'll be popping in and out as I'm on the way to a doctor's appointment.
All right.
Oh, so he's going to amputate your head, is he?
No, he's going to remove a growth called John Rowe-litis. And
so good.
Okay. Well, less of that because we are here for stories.
Yes.
So less banter, more stories. So I need to introduce. We appear to be on Facebook Live. So everything is marvelous. So, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and assembled company, please welcome Sarah Lloyd Winder for more magnificent stories. Sarah,
yeah.
take it away.
Yeah.
Well, here we are in not sunny South Mims, and the bells haven't started ringing yet. But I do expect them to ring at some point because, as is traditional in some villages, Friday night is bell ringing practice. Yay! Unfortunately, those poor bell ringers now have to walk like 3/4 of an hour. No, not that quite, but that far to get to the pub. They used to come out the door, go down the road and go to the pub. But the pub's closed and things like that are different in the country now. But in the past, they were very strange sometimes. Have you heard the story of the hedgehog? You see, there was once a hedgehog. The hedgehogs are very particular about where they go. They're prickly little creatures with funny little noses and bright, sparky eyes. And they come out at dusk and they go the same way every day. They like to go the same way every day. They don't like anybody else getting in their way. And one day, as the hedgehog set off down the road, there was a man standing in the way. And the hedgehog looked at the man, and he didn't like it. Now, sometimes a hedgehog will curl into a ball. But no, this hedgehog did not. It drew itself up all to its biggest size, which is not very big if you've seen a hedgehog. They are not big. It drew itself up, it stretched out its spines, and it ran straight for the ankles of the man standing in the way. And strangely enough, you know, the man just looked down at that prickly round thing. He almost kicked it, but he stopped. He said, "Hedgehog, this is my pathway. Do not walk on my pathway." The hedgehog, he stopped and said, "No, no, 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 no. This is my pathway." And an argument started. "It is my pathway," said the man, "for I am a person of great intent." "Well," said the hedgehog, "I am a hedgehog of great intent. I intend to walk down this pathway every day, and I have been doing for the last years, as long as I have been a grown-up hedgehog." But the man was not moving, and the hedgehog was not moving, and their argument continued. They bantered to and fro for hours and hours until it got dark. And then, almost at the same time, they both turned and walked away from each other, saying, "I shall be back tomorrow. I shall be back," said the man. And they went away. Well, the next day, just as dusk was setting, you know, that time when the light goes down, it's like a dimmer switch in the heaven. It gets darker. Well, along the pathway came the hedgehog. Snuffle, snuffle, grunt, grunt, snuffle, snuffle, grunt, grunt, happy little hedgehog. When in the other direction came the man, big man walking. "This is my pathway, and I am going to walk." And they met again. And again they stopped, both of them. Now, they did not eye to eye each other because, of course, the man was up here and the hedgehog was down there. But they located each other with their senses, and they stood their ground, and neither would move. And today they had a silence off. The man did not move, did not speak. His legs seemed stuck to the ground, and the hedgehog also. He was not going to give in to this human. So as it got dark, yet again, they turned on their heels and walked away. Well, the hedgehog was not happy. And he spent the whole day in his little nest thinking, "How am I going to get round this man? What do I know about man? Man likes to win. I have an idea." So that night, as dusk was setting, out came the hedgehog. Scrumble, scrumble, nudge, nudge, scrabble, scrabble. Little nose sniffing the ground, his feet pawing the ground. And the man sauntered up, looking at the thing on the ground. But the hedgehog was ready. "Man," said the hedgehog, "I challenge you. I challenge you to a race." "A race," said the man. "Don't be ridiculous." "Ha," said the hedgehog. "You are a big man with a big head full of I don't know what, but you're stubborn as a mule. I challenge you to a race." "Okay," said the man, laughing. Of course. You can have a race if you want a race. You see this field next to us," said the hedgehog. "I challenge you to run 10 times up and down this field as fast as me." Well, the man was a bit surprised. He looked at the field and he thought, "I can do that so easily. What is this hedgehog thinking?" But then he is a hedgehog and probably his brain is quite small. So he agreed. They didn't shake hands, as that would be difficult for a hedgehog, but they agreed. And they turned on their heels and walked away. The next night, at dusk, the two of them were right back at the start of the field, next to each other, eyeing each other. The snuffling hedgehog, snuffle, snuffle, look, snuffle, snuffle, look. The man standing up, looking down, so superior. The hedgehog was ready, and he got Fox to come to start the race, because he thought Fox was big enough to shout loud enough. So there was hedgehog, man, and fox. The fox looked round the field, checked. "I think we're ready." I don't know what we were ready for, but he was definitely ready. And so man stood in that running position that all men stand in when they're about to run. And I mean man as human, not just man as man. There he was, standing ready to run. And there was Hedgehog, standing as hedgehogs do, on its 4 legs, ready to go. And the fox said, what would the fox say? He would say, ready, steady, go! And off they went, man racing and laughing, seeing the little hedgehog on its little legs racing behind him. He slowed down a bit, then he ran and he slowed down a bit, and he got to the end of the field and he was laughing so much he almost tripped over his own feet as he started to turn round, and he didn't look. Because you see, a hedgehog isn't as stupid as you think. He raced straight for the hedge. And it was like a relay race. What looked like a hedgehog, exactly the same hedgehog came out, but this one, well, was not tired at all. And as the joking, laughing man turned round, that little hedgehog was halfway across the field. Down it raced, and the man had to put on a sprint to catch up the hedgehog. They reached the other end at the same time. Into the hedge went the hedgehog, spinning round. Out he came, shooting out, racing across the field. The man was running and running and running. He was neck and neck with the hedgehog all that way. This was the 3rd race across the field. 10, he thought, this hedgehog is incredible. What's wrong with me? Up to the fence, turn around, and off they went, and the hedgehog sped across. 8 times they raced, and the man was getting tired. As they hit the 9th run, that hedgehog was definitely doing better than the man. The man hadn't trained. The man hadn't run a field 10 times since his youth. And the little hedgehog was scampering out ahead of him. He made a fine effort. They twisted. Hedgehog well in advance. And they set off on the home run. And the hedgehog was all yards and yards in front. And there was the fox with a flag. You need a flag if you don't have a tape across the field. And as soon as the hedgehog crossed the line, the flag went down. The hedgehog cheered, looked at the man who was stumbling in exhaustion back. What had happened to that hedgehog? Had he been training for months and just challenged him on the off? The man didn't know, but his pride would not let him stay. And he shouted, I don't know what you've done, little hedgehog, but you may walk that pathway around the field on your own from now onwards. I don't care. And he strutted off back into the village. But the hedgehog suddenly was surrounded by 9 other little hedgehogs, all who look exactly the same. Because all hedgehogs look the same to a human, don't they? Slightly bigger, slightly smaller, but all prickly, all with little noses, bright button eyes, and very clever. So never ever challenge a hedgehog in a running race, because they are very, very smart. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Is that an allegory for yuppies moving into villages?
For people who walk all the way up the drive, reach the fields, have a panic, and turn and come back down the hill drive that I go up every day. That is...
Yeah. Well, I remember being at a party in a gatehouse, and this guy was saying, I was walking my dog where my dad had walked his dog, and his dog had walked his dog before him. And this pair of yellow wellies got up out of the ditch and told me I was on private land, and I told him what I thought of private land. And I won't go on from there because it's a children's program. And there's a there's a Woody Guthrie song which has got, well, the verse they always miss out of "This Land Is Your Land"
Yeah.
is the one that says they come across the sign, you know, or the sign that says private land, but on the other side it said nothing. That is the side for you and me.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
they don't sing that at the White House when they're singing "This Land Is Your Land."
They don't
Anyway,
share.
I'll let you go on. I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I just interjected there for a minute, and you got
No,
a planned set.
that's absolutely fine. Me and him, the one on the floor behind me who's sleeping. Oh, yeah, his eyes are closed now. We've done our walk today, and no hedgehogs were seen. But Matthew swears there was a badger down the road the other morning, and badgers are big. So I think you would not challenge the badger to the race. Anyway, I move on to the Princess of Canterbury. Canterbury being a town in the southeast of England. And so this is set a long time ago when there were many kingdoms around this place, and there was a Princess of Canterbury. Once upon a time, the Princess of Canterbury, who was the only child of the King of Canterbury, was growing up. And the king looked at her and realized she was now a young woman. She would have to marry. But this girl, she knew her own mind. And when he said, "You have to marry," she said, "Really? But can I choose?" "Within reason," said her father. "Within reason. You can have 3 questions." Okay, that was acceptable. So a proclamation was sent out. I love the word proclamation. The shout was sent out. Woman needs husband. Really? The proclamation was sent out, and young men came from all over the place, and they crowded in front of the princess, and they answered her questions so badly that she could not cope. "Why would you want to marry me?" she'd say, and they'd say, "Oh, because your eyes are like pools into which I want to drop." "Really?" she'd say. "Why do you think you would be good as my husband?" "Oh, because I would lie on the floor in front of you and make sure that no wet got onto your clothes." "Really? You'd lie? You wouldn't just put your cloak down?" They were terrible. Each one got worse. Each one was more fawning and ridiculous. And so she said no to all of them. So the poor king, he was getting a bit hairy by now. Not hairy in the head, but hairy in the angry sense. "We have to do more," he said. "Send the proclamation wider." So from Kent, it went to the south. From the south, it went to the Midlands. From the Midlands, it then went up north. It reached as far as the Lake District. In the Lake District, there was a baron with 3 young sons. 2 were elegant young men, dandies almost. They wore their clothes well. They fought with good swords. They could tell a poem. And they knew how to treat a lady. Unfortunately, the 3rd one was slightly different. His mother called him Jack by the Hedge, her beautiful Jack. Jack was interesting. He didn't obey any of the rules that his brothers did. Clothes were what you put on to go out and look at the world. Coats had to have pockets because you needed enough pockets to put in all the things you'd find when you went out into the world. You would find leaves, you would find twigs, you would find nuts, you would find grasses, you would find flowers. Everything was important to Jack. He wanted to know about everything. There is a feather, a new feather. What is black with white spots? I don't have my feathers in tonight. What is blue? Tiny and blue. Oh, the kingfisher feather. He collected everything in his pockets. His brothers thought he was ridiculous. He's a menace. He knows more about the bird's song and the grasses in the field than he knows how to treat a lady. We don't need him when we go south, said the boys. But the father was insistent. 3 or no, he said. All 3 have to go, or no one goes. So you can imagine the 2 boys. We have to take him. He's a disgrace. But they couldn't get away with it. Horses were made ready, packs were put on the back. And of course, Jack was late. Jack had seen something. He needed to collect something. He needed another bag to put another bag of stuff in. Eventually, they all got on the road. But Jack drove the other 2 boys bonkers. There was a tree he'd never seen before. Have you seen that tree, he'd say. It's got wiggly, wiggly branches. It's a wiggly willow, I think. I've never seen anything like that before. And so he would pick up the branch and stick it in his pocket. A nut! That tree has a nut. I'll take the nut as well. And then there were flowers, and then there were fruits, and every hour, every mile, he wanted to stop and look at something else. And the other 2 boys, they were so frustrated with him. Why can't you just ride? We want to go south. Well, they were about an hour from Canterbury when he saw an egg on the pathway. Oh, it was beautiful. Very small, greeny blue, very pointed. He said, might be a thrush. And he picked it up. Oh, it's warm, he said. And he wrapped it carefully in some moss and carefully put it right in an inside pocket. But suddenly they were in Canterbury and everything was changing. So the older boys came into their own. Soon they were ordering flowers and chocolates and changing and brushing themselves down and knocking on the big gates of the palace. And they were escorted straight in and into the most amazing chamber. And everybody seemed to be there, ready and waiting. And Jack, he took one look at the princess and he walked straight forward. He said, and he looked straight at her, which you're not quite supposed to do, you know. And so the princess looked back at him, and she said, what are you looking at? And he said the most amazing thing. He said, I'm looking at your bosom and thinking, as he delved into his pocket, this egg would do very well just there. That's exactly the right place to keep it warm. Yes. And everybody was giving shocked looks. The princess herself had a tiny little smile. She couldn't believe anybody would be so impertinent. But he was. Really, she said. The egg was there. How would you get it out? And Jack, he didn't stop. He just went in another pocket. He came out with that wiggly willow. And he said, I'd use this. It would be absolutely brilliant for getting eggs out of ladies' bosoms. And now everybody in the room was starting to giggle. And the princess, her smile was getting bigger. Really, she said, is this how you treat a lady? You would expect her to put an egg in her bosom to allow you to flick it out. Is that what you do? And Jack straight away said, well, I could leave it there till it hatched, and then we could see if it really was a thrush. At which point, everybody in the room was laughing hysterically. And the princess was smiling at him. And so he looked at her and he said, oh, that's my 3 questions. Do we get married now? At which point the king stepped forward. Hold on a minute, he said. Hold on. I think this is a bit quick. But, said the princess, there were 3 questions, I suppose. Yes, said Jack, I'm sure I answered 3 questions. He said. Well, said the king, I still think we need a pause, a breathing space. Young man, return here in a month. And that was it. Jack and his brothers turned and left. The brothers, with an expensive bunch of flowers and an expensive box of chocolates each, very angry. But Jack, happy he would be back in a month. She was quite nice, that princess. Nothing like he expected. So off he went, back with his brothers. And then a month later turned round and set off from the Lake District all the way back down to Kent. But this time, oh, it was so exciting. There was nobody to stop him. Everywhere he went, he could do what he wanted. New plants, new trees. And he went a different route this time. And just as he was coming towards Canterbury, he went by a river and he was looking in. And there he saw some tiny little fish. I haven't seen those before, he said. And he put his hands in and he picked them out and put him in his pocket. And then he carried on, straight to the palace. This time, everybody knew who he was, and they escorted him into a chamber where the princess was sitting with a table full of food. Oh, my goodness. Jack suddenly realised he hadn't eaten for at least 2 days. He'd just been so excited. And so he ate and he ate and he ate. And then, oh dear, he was getting quite tired. And then he was putting his hands in his pockets. And the princess said, "What is in your pockets?" Oh, he said, "I'm just doing a bit of pocket fishing, you know." "Pocket fishing," she said. "What is pocket fishing?" "Don't you know? Come here. Give me your hand." And he gently put her hand in his pocket. And the little fish tickled her hand. And she laughed and giggled and laughed. And she ran and got a bowl and they pulled out one of the fish and popped it in. Oh, it swam and it swam and it swam. But then trumpets were heard, marching was heard, and the king was marching through the corridors of the palace towards the princess's chamber. Men were shouting and the doors were flung open and he was announced, "His Royal Highness, His Majesty, the King of Canterbury." And he came before Jack and he said, "And what are you doing to my daughter this time?" "Oh, nothing," said Jack. "I'm just doing some pocket fishing." "What is pocket fishing?" "Haven't you ever done pocket fishing? Come here." And you don't just walk up to kings and grab their hands, but Jack did. And he walked up to the king and he pulled the hand and he put the hand in his pocket. And the king felt in the pocket and the little fish nibbled and nibbled and nibbled and pulled his hand out. "What is that?" he said. "It's the fish," said Jack. "Do you want to see?" And so they ordered another bowl. And they got a bowl and there Jack pulled out 3 more little fish and they swam and the king was laughing and his daughter was laughing and Jack was smiling and the deal seemed to be sealed, for it was the most strange and unusual way of proposing, but it was a good way. And that is how Jack came to be the Prince of Canterbury. And eventually, I hear tell, he was a very good king who knew a lot about agriculture, fish, and plants. And that is my story of the Princess of Canterbury, which was very silly. Can't hear a thing.
Wonderful, wonderful.
So I have one more story. And this story comes from Somerset. As all good stories have to come from either Somerset or Hertfordshire at the moment. That had a link to the Lake District where my father comes from. But, you know, Somerset is the place I lived in for most of my young life. So it's a very important place. Once there was a family and they lived on a big farm beneath a hill, and the land was green and the land was good. But the farmer's wife died, and the farmer was left with 2 children that he didn't know what to do with. And his mind seemed to wander a bit. And it was infected with a thought. Somebody told him that his land held treasure, and all he had to do was look for it. Well, it started off quite normally. He was still a farmer most of the time, and at weekends he would dig and look for the treasure. But soon he would do more digging and less farming, and more digging and less farming, until he did no farming and just digging, and his land became a land of holes. And it didn't make him happier, and it didn't make him healthier, and it didn't make him any money. And soon his sadness and his desperation made the poor man die. And he left his son and his daughter, but on his deathbed, he told his son to carry on the way I have done. Which is a very strange thing to say, but he did exactly what he was told. So the son, he said, I will carry on and I will search for this treasure. But the daughter, she looked around and saw the land is being decimated. You're just digging holes. You're not looking after any. Well, we've barely got any animals. But the son said that to the daughter, if you want to look after animals, you can go and live in the hut down the end of the field. And you can have that old scratchy cow. Nobody wants it anyway. I think there's a donkey and a couple of chickens. You have them and you go and live down there. And I will carry on father's work. As if father's work was good. Well, the young woman went down to the bottom of the field where there was a hut. But she thought, this is my hut, and I will make it as good as possible. And so she cleaned it, and she swept it, and she made it warm and toasty. And then she looked at the animals. Oh, my goodness, they were in a state. The cow, where it should have a stomach, it had a U-bend. And on its skin were sores and illnesses. So the girl, she went out and she got herbs and she got sweet grass and she fed the cow. And soon the cow was looking better. It's amazing what care can do, she thought. And then she looked at the chickens. Oof, they're not so bad, really. And so outside her little hut was an old orchard, and during the time that her father had dug and dug and dug, nobody had been to the orchard, and the trees were all bent and twisted, and the grass had grown up to where the leaves grow down. Goodness me, she thought. Nobody knows that these trees even exist, but trees have apples. That is a good start. So she put the cow in the orchard, and soon the cow was eating down the grass. And as the cow ate down the grass, the chickens followed in, and they scratched and they scratched and they scraped and they scratched. And then other escapees from the farm came. A duck, 2 ducks came waddling in one day. And so the girl, she found a hole in the orchard. She put in an old basin with some water for the ducks, and soon there were ducks and chickens and a cow walking through the orchard. Just outside the hut, she scraped away some ground, and with the help of the chickens, she made it a small garden. But she had no money. I'll go and work for others. So she would go on a day trip out and work for another farm and earn some money so she could get some grain and some seeds to plant. And soon those chickens who had looked all scratchy and sad were now happy chickens living in the orchard next to the cow. And they were giving eggs every day. And the cow that had been so sunken in its stomach, it was eating grass higher than itself. And now it was giving rich milk every day. So the girl was making butter and cheese, and she sold her butter and cheese and eggs. And she was doing well. And through the year, spring came, and suddenly those trees, those old beaten up apple trees, they blossomed. And there is nothing more beautiful than blossoming apple trees. It makes you smile and makes you feel happy. And under her trees were her cow and her chickens and her ducks. And wow, it was a good life. It was getting better. And through the year, her plants grew and her vegetables grew. She was making a little bit of money on the side with her eggs and her cheese and her butter. But as winter came, winter was bitter. And all she could hear from the other side of the fence where her brother lived was a man making holes, a man shouting about making holes, a man swearing about making holes and not finding the treasure. And it came to Christmas. And a few days before Christmas, her brother came round. You know, you have to pay rent on this place. Really, she said, but you just sent me down to a broken old shack with a couple of chickens. I still need some rent, he said. I need a silver sixpence for my rent. Okay, she said, you will have your silver sixpence. Well, the apples had grown and they weren't very big, but she had made some cider out of her apples and she put them in an old stone jar on the shelf, and she'd left it there hoping it would be good to celebrate for Christmas. But she hadn't realised that there was a little hole at the bottom, a crack, and most of the cider had dripped out, drip, 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 as the days had got colder, 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 drip, drip, drip. And just before Christmas, she looked at the cider and realised there was nothing left. She couldn't make milk anymore because the cow had run out. She couldn't sell eggs because the chickens had stopped. And suddenly the winds were blowing round her cottage just as Christmas was coming. And suddenly she felt so sad. But she wasn't giving up. She went and looked at the trees and thought, do you know, they need a bit of celebration. I remember when we were children, we used to sing in front of the trees. It's a mad English tradition. It's called to wassail. And she remembered what to do. She went inside and there was the last bit of cider in that broken stone jar. And she put it in a bowl. And she got some toast and she soaked it in the cider. Then she took a stick, a big stick, and she went out. And for some reason, I am not quite sure, to wassail, you put the toast in the tree, you drink the health of the tree, and you beat it with a stick. Now, some say it is to drive the spirits out, and others say, well, really, it helps all those insects that are nibbling away inside the tree. Whatever, it was a celebration. And there in the orchard was the girl with the cow and the chickens and the ducks. And she sang and she danced and she smiled and she laughed at herself. And she stood looking at the tree. Do you know that tree's looking so gnarled and old, looked exactly like a face when you looked at it as the sun went down and as it got darker. And that face seemed to smile at her. And the face spoke, said, young lady, I hear that others are digging holes. I tell you, if you dig a hole down here, underneath my spreading feet, you'll find the treasure that many have looked for and none have found. Thank you, young lady, for celebrating with me for giving what little you have. It's been a joy. Well, she thought she was going absolutely bonkers by this stage. Trees don't talk, and they definitely don't talk to me. And she turned away, but the animals didn't turn away. They seemed to walk closer to the tree, and the chickens seemed to be scratching more than normal just underneath the tree, and the cows seemed to be rubbing the tree, and the ducks were moseying on down, and they have such funny noses. And they seemed to insist that she dig a hole. And she thought it was ridiculous, and she laughed at herself, but she went and got a spade. And she thought it was ridiculous, and she laughed at herself, but she dug a hole. And she thought it was ridiculous, and she laughed at herself until her spade, bang, hit a box. And there in the hole was a big brown box. And she dug and she dug and she dug all the way round. But she wiggled and she pulled and she wiggled and she pulled and she heaved out a box. A bit broken, a bit battered, a bit old and very wooden. And she pulled and she could see glinting inside. And she put the lid down quickly. And she filled up the hole and she shuffled all the animals around to stop. Make sure it looked like it had done before. And she carried the box into the house when no one was looking. She pulled up the lid and she looked, and there was the treasure that they had all been looking for. But she didn't quite know what to do. And then she remembered her brother would be asking for his 1 shilling, and she smiled to herself. And she thought about being careful. So she took the box and she found an old pair of wellies by the door, and she tipped all the coins into it and put some rubbish on top and took the box outside and buried it somewhere else, empty. And that was Christmas Eve, and she could hear the bells of the church ringing. Now there is an old tale in Somerset that says at midnight on Christmas Eve, the animals grow magic and they speak. And the brother, so obsessed with the digging and the holes and the treasure, thought, ha, the animals will know where the treasure is. I will wait till the bell rings for midnight, and I will go and listen to hear what the animals say. So he crept down to his sister's house, because of course he had no animals left. He'd spent all his time digging holes. And there he was in the barn outside his sister's shack. And there was the old cow, mooing gently as the chickens crouched by the cow's feet. And the moo turned gently into words. And the cow seemed to say, you know, someone is looking for treasure. Well, chickens, I know the treasure has been found, and only an idiot would continue to drink out of holes in the ground. And the words changed back into a gentle lowing of the cow and the silence of the bells and the snoring of the ducks, because if you know anything, ducks do snore. And the young man did not believe it, but he went back to bed as angry as he ever was. Drinking out of holes? Well, before dawn the next morning, a strange little line had departed from the shack at the bottom of the garden. The cow seemed to be carrying bags over its back. In one side were chickens, in the other side ducks. But if you'd looked carefully, underneath the chickens was a pile of coins, and underneath the ducks was another pile of coins. And on a little table in the house was 1 silver sixpence. And over the hill walked the girl with her strange fellows into a valley far away. And if you'd met her that day, she would have said, I have sought my fortune, and I'm going to buy a little bit of land and start anew in the gentle rolling fields of Somersetshire. And of the son who just dug holes, there is no more to tell. And that is the end of my story.
Well, Sarah, that was fun. What a lovely evening. What a so thank you, Sarah. A big round of applause from everybody, please. Right. And thank you, Waleed, for flying the magic carpet, which Sarah flew on. And what we've got coming up? Wednesday at 7 o'clock, where Justine Demir is running her Tales and Tunes, is the hostess for Tales and Tunes. You're all welcome to come tell a tale, sing a song, do a poem, whatever you want. Next Friday, we go to Canada, where we find Norman Perrin, who will delight us next Friday, and so on and so forth. We're bringing back Worldwide Story Round on the 22nd. So see you all there. Meanwhile, thank you once again, Sarah. And I've just got a sign saying extremely low battery, 10% remaining.
Let's go.
So I must say good night to us all.
Bye. Save your 10%. See you soon.
Bye-bye.
See you soon.
Bye.
Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Later.